So, I'm working on the assumption that we're not going to be in person again for Thursday and Friday classes. If we are, then I'll probably just have you watch the video and then help you do whatever you need to do during class, whether it's catch up or whatever. But I just don't think we're going to be in person. It's been snowing and there's been some sleet outside my house all morning, so it just doesn't seem likely. So I'm going to work under the assumption that we won't be in person. Um, so got some more. I got 7 more responses on the college stuff, and this will be the end. This day will be the end of kind of our talking about that stuff. We'll be starting something new next week. But I thought that it might be good for you guys to just hear the answers to some of these questions. And then, maybe if we can, if you still have other questions that you want answered, then, if we're back in person next week or whatever, then I can still answer those questions for you, and that can be part of the day, for whatever day that is. Um, but just make sure everybody's questions get answered, essentially. So I had 7 more, like I said, and so I'm going to go through a couple of them. I don't think any of them are repeats. Um, so, talking about, let's talk about college first off. So, one of the questions is, how do I find out how much aid I can get? Um, so, once you've done your FAFSA and you have applied to college, if you get accepted around March and April, they will send you something called an award letter, and they will let you know how much aid you've gotten. Um, it will be probably electronic, and then they may send you a paper copy as well. It may just be electronic. Do you want to make sure that um, if they've given you a login to your school account, like if they've given you something to get into um, anything on that college's website that's personally for you, like your email or anything like that, make sure you've logged into that, you know how to navigate it, because some of that stuff will be sent to you that way. And I can help with that too, as long as you have the email, if you've gotten one. Um, the key is to get accepted, and then once you get accepted, as long as you've had your FAFSA sent to those schools, then um, they will send you an award letter. Okay. So it's pretty straightforward. It's just making sure that you have your boxes checked. That's really all it comes down to. So when you apply on the FAFSA, you want to have some colleges in mind, and you want to go ahead and put them in there. Even if you're not 100% sure, or if you're dead set on going to one, I would still put a couple backups just in case. You never know what's going to happen. And it's always good to make sure that you have some other options if need be. Okay. So when you fill out the FAFSA, you'll check on there which college to send it to, and then the college will send you information about how much financial aid you've received. Um, let's see. Next question is, um, what if I'm not positive what I want to go to college for? Okay, so part of the good thing about college is that if you go to a 4-year university, you typically do not have to declare a major until after you've been in there for 2 years. Is that always the case? No. But what that will allow you to do is while you're getting some of those things that you're required to take, because you'll be required to take like an English 101, or maybe higher, a math 101, or maybe higher, those different things, while you're taking those things, you can also take courses that you might be interested in. So maybe if you thought about, maybe you're interested in doing something with the environment, you could take a class that's about that. Maybe you're interested in something to do with like public relations, like speaking on behalf of a company or anything like that. You can take a class on that, and you can communications class. Excuse me. The best part about college for me was that I had the opportunity to take some classes that I normally would not have been able to take if I had maybe just gone to a 2-year university. Now, if you're planning on just going to a 2-year university, you have to pick that a little bit sooner. You will still have things that you're required to take, but they will mostly be for your major. My suggestion is to think about things that you're interested in, think about things that you like to do. Surely there is something that you like to do other than sleep. And so, try to find some information out about that job or about that profession, about that field. Maybe there's something in a lot of different things that you're interested in, and you want to make sure that you take the time to explore those things. And you may get into one of those classes and you decide that's not for you. You may start taking an engineering class and you think, I want to do this. You could still switch, right? Sometimes it takes you longer if you have to switch classes, but if you're not very far into a program, then it shouldn't take you that long. My suggestion right now is to do as much research as you possibly can about things that you like to do. If you like designing things, maybe you're destined to be an interior designer. Maybe you're destined to work in some sort of art related field. There's a ton of things that you can do in the art field, right? So just keep an open mind would be my suggestion whenever you're talking about trying to figure out what you want to go to college for. And don't let yourself get boxed in if it's something that you don't actually want to do, because you're going to get down the road 20 years from now and you're going to think, I hate this. If it's something that you're kind of like, I don't really necessarily want to do this forever, but it's okay for me right now, or it will help me to make money and things like that. Maybe your goal is not necessarily to be in one particular profession, but you want to do something that will allow you to have a comfortable life. And if that's the case, you want to look at things that have higher salaries. I know that that's unfortunate, but it's kind of the reality sometimes is that, when you're an adult, um, you want to be able to do certain things. And sometimes the professions that you want to go into are not going to get you there. And so it kind of depends. It comes down to really and truly what you can do, what you can deal with as a soon to be an adult. Um, and I'm happy to talk to you guys about any of this stuff one on one. So if you have any specific questions, like specific things that you want to ask me about, if I don't know the answer, I will try to find you an answer. Okay, so um, always an option there. All right. Um, let's see. Um, Next question is it hard to handle a job and college at the same time? That depends. And largely that depends on what kind of job you're working, how many hours you're taking in college. Now, some of you guys will qualify for something called a work study, which is where you get paid to work on campus, and it just comes to your pocket. It's not necessarily a ton of money that you're making, but if you're living on campus, it can definitely help you out. Okay. Um, those are not difficult typically to balance. Those are typically relatively easy. You work about 10 hours a week, and it's not anything too strenuous. You can usually study while you're working on it or whatever it might be. Now, if you're working a job, where you're trying to get in, let's say 20 to 30 hours a week, that's going to prove more difficult because you still have to put in time for studying and things like that. If you are good at managing your time, then it'll be really easy because you will know how to do that. If you are not good at managing your time, you need to learn now. Um, you've had a lot of time where you've been working on schoolwork from home. And so part of working in college will be that you'll have to study whenever you get home, even if you're not tired. Or even if you are tired, you may have to do some homework when you get home. Even if you're tired, you may have to write a paper, even if you are tired. Um, if you don't allow yourself to get super far behind in college, you will be fine. But you have to make sure that you're making time as often as possible to do the work that you need to do for school and not just for your work. Um, so it's up to you. It's up to how you are as a person. I can't answer that question completely for you, but if you do the right things for yourself, you can manage it. Okay. Let's see. Um. Okay. Next question. Speaking of getting behind is, well, I have extra time to finish late work. Being at work almost every day and only get 2 days off a week, really struggling. So as far as your work goes for me, you have until the end of the 9 weeks to get it done. But here's the thing. When I say that, I don't mean you slop something together the last day of the 9 weeks and I give you full credit. I don't want that. Um, if it's late a week, whatever, just get it turned in. I will get it graded eventually, but I'd rather have your best work and your own work than somebody else's. So I'm willing to give you up until they tell me that I can't give you any more time, which is typically till the end of the 9 weeks. I had to have grades turned in on Friday, but I try to go back and grade everything from the entire first semester, so first 9 weeks and second 9 weeks, and gave you scores for that if I had it. And so hopefully, I caught all of your stuff. If there's something that you think I missed, I can always go back and look at that timestamp and I can adjust accordingly. Because if you had it turned in and I missed it somehow, then we can go from there. But I think I only had until 3:30 or 4 on Friday to get things turned in. But I gave you as much time as I possibly could, and that's the same case for now, for this 9 weeks and the fourth 9 weeks. Obviously, I want you guys to graduate. I want you guys to pass your senior year. And I realize that it's difficult for you guys sometimes. You may be caring for your little siblings. You may be working all the time, maybe trying to graduate early. I don't know. But for all those things that are going on, um, what it comes down to is you still have to ultimately do that work. And so, if you're doing the work, um, even if it's a week or two late, I'm not upset at you. But I do want you to get it done. That's what it comes down to, is get it done. Um, Even if it's late, I'd rather you turn it in late than not turn it in at all. That's how it always goes with me. If you've had me before, you know that. If you've not had me before, now you do. Okay. Um, let's see. Another question that's related to like school related stuff is, how do you get into trade school? So my assumption is you're thinking about like welding, carpentry, things like that. So the first thing I would suggest is to make sure that you've taken those classes in high school if they've been available to you. So if you're going to go into a welding program after you graduate, I would hope that you've been taking welding classes. Has it probably been difficult during the pandemic? Yes, but if you've been taking those classes, that's fine. The second thing I would suggest is that you either email Miss Lemaster, or if you're taking a welding class, you email, or whatever class you're taking that you want to go into, that you email that person. But if you don't have that person, so if you haven't been taking that class or we don't offer it, email Miss Lemaster, and she can probably help you find a school that would be suitable for you. I don't want you to forget about things like ACTC, because they typically will offer different trade certifications. It honestly just depends on where you want to go. There are schools that are specific to things like welding and carpentry and things like that, but many of them do not accept financial aid. And so you have to make sure that you'd be able to take out loans in order to get those. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay. Miss Lemaster can help you with that. She can talk to you through that process a little bit further if you have more questions. But my suggestion is start from whoever is teaching you that particular trade right now. And they will be able to sort of point you in direction of people who have gone before you, students who have gone before you, and where they have gone to be successful in those things. You just want to make sure that you weigh all your options. That's really what it comes down to, is making sure you weigh all your options. If I'm going to go to this one school here, but I can't get financial aid and I'm going to have to go into debt $5,000, or I can go over here to this school and I don't have to go into debt, and I get a scholarship to go there, then it seems like maybe there's one that's a better option than the other. The only difference might be if one is accredited and one is not, and that's a whole other conversation. But most places that you will apply to where you're trying to get a trade, they are accredited for that particular trade. Um, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about that. It's a lot of information, I know. But as far as getting into a trade school, the actual process is just like an application to college. Just like what I showed you guys whenever we went through it the last time. It's essentially just, you go to that school's website and you look for the application. It'll say apply now, or it'll say future students. And it's pretty straightforward on how to apply. You probably will need things like social security number, need to know some of those things. Good phone number, good email address, but otherwise, it's pretty straightforward about how to apply there. Okay. Um, how do I get experience for a job if I've never had a job? That is the $1,000,000 question. The only recommendation that I can truly give you is to try to find a job that will hire you at the entry level. And so if you want to work, maybe you want to be a mechanic, um, call around at some of the shops around here and see if they will let you work a couple hours a week. Because even if you don't get a full-time position, if you're working a couple hours a week and that's what you want to be doing, you'll learn a lot. Um, I'm hesitant to recommend volunteering, just because that typically ends up with you getting some experience, but also maybe being, what's the term I'm looking for, being overextended, because you're just there for it without pay, your extra hands, and sometimes that doesn't work out so well. But volunteer work, if you have done it before, does count on as job experience. If you have been told before that you don't have enough experience for a job, either that job requires a lot more responsibility than what your resume says, and maybe you just need to work another entry level job, and try to work your way up through that. Or it could also mean that you're just not the right candidate, and that will happen a lot when you're doing the job search process. And it's a reality for everybody who's applied for a job. I think before I got my first teaching job, I applied at about 75 schools, maybe more, and I only got one interview. Luckily, I aced the interview and got the job, but it's not always the case, and it just is what it is sometimes. But that would be my biggest recommendation, is to try to find a job that is entry level, that you can work. If you're planning on going to college next year, and you just want something that'll help you, get a job like waiting tables, fast food, a coffee shop maybe, or a work study. And if you get a work study, you will get a lot of experience. When I did a work study in college, I got a lot of experience, and I got to do something I actually enjoyed doing, which some schools will try to do. Um, if you have no other options, you can't commit to a job, or whatever it might be, then you could always try to volunteer. But I would make sure that you're very clear about setting hours that you can help, um, and telling the people that you're volunteering for what you hope to get out of it. You don't want to work in a garage, trying to learn how to be a mechanic and only be um, sitting at the front desk. That's not learning how to be a mechanic. That's maybe the learning the business side of things. So maybe if you wanted to own your own business eventually, that'd be good. But you want to make sure that you're telling them, well, I like doing this stuff too, but can I learn how to do some of the behind the scenes stuff? So just want to make sure that if you do volunteer your time, that you're getting the most out of that time that you volunteer. Okay. All right. Last question that I have been given this time around is, how do leases work for apartments? Okay. This is a fun question. So typically, let's say, for example, you are going to Moorhead next year. You don't want to live on campus. So you are trying to apply for an apartment. You go look at the apartment, make sure it's the right, thing for you or whatever. Maybe you have a roommate, whatever. So the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure you have income and you have proof of income, because an apartment's not going to be rented out to you if you don't have any proof of income. They're going to be like, why are you wanting to rent from me if you don't have any money? Okay. Um, Second thing, there's usually an application process. Some are more than intense than others. Some are like, do you want the place or not? It just depends on where you're going. But usually they'll have some sort of application on file. That way they can reach you and things like that, and you'll fill out the application. Now, if you are going to apply to get in this apartment, and you do get this apartment, typically your landlord will have um, something where they want you to pay something up front. Okay. It's a deposit that you typically will put down on an apartment. It varies depending on where you're getting your apartment from as far as how much that costs. Some landlords will make you pay, quote unquote, first and last month's rent, which means like if your rent is $500, you have to pay $1,000 to start living there. Some of them will say, a $200 deposit. So most landlords will work with you. So let's say you're trying to get an apartment right now and you don't have $1,000, but you have 500. Set up already. You can pay that down, and then you could be paying the other part. But you want to make sure that if you're getting an apartment, whatever your monthly rent is something that you can afford. Okay, if you're making minimum wage and you're paying a $700 um, apartment payment, plus you're having to deal with your utilities and everything else, you're not going to be able to cut it. Okay, so you want to be realistic about how much you can afford. Now, if you have a roommate or something like that, it might be a little bit easier to do that, and that's where we get into there. Leases are typically year to year, so you will sign that lease, and you are expected to stay in that lease for the entire year. Typically, if you break the lease, the landlord can charge you the rest of the rent that you owe, which you don't want to deal with. Sometimes they'll let you do a shorter lease, like a 6-month lease, if you're a college student, because you would only be there from, let's say August to May, but you would come home for the summer, for example, or something like that. But typically, if you rent an apartment somewhere, the assumption is that you're going to live there for at least a year. Okay. Um, so you don't want to break a lease. Breaking the lease is not great, because they will probably, on the application, typically on most applications for apartments, they will ask you for previous landlords. And so if you put that you live somewhere, you got to put where you got that the landlord was your landlord. And if you broke your lease, your landlord's going to say, hey, he or she broke my lease. So, you can take it or leave it. Um, you pay monthly, you learn where to pay, how to pay. Um, I would say based on my experiences from renting when I lived in Richmond, uh, um, it's nice to have utilities paid for, but you're not always going to find them. But it's nice to have. Um, so that's all the questions that I've gotten for this round. And so, um, only thing I'm going to have you do today is do something that will be useful for you in the future. Okay, apply for a job, take your FAFSA, apply for another college scholarship. Um, I don't know, clean your room, do something that will make you better prepared for the future. That's your assignment for today, because next week we're starting something new. And I don't want to give you like a big grand assignment. We've already done a lot of things with this.